Missionaries have not gone there. Civilization has not gone there. Nobody from the outside world had gone and infiltrated them with their teachings and so on. Still, those people believe one thing. They believe in a blood covenant. They consider a blood covenant to be very sacred. And the blood covenant lifts them from, even if they're cannibals, even if they are living such a low life, it lifts them to a different level, it seems like. They become all of a sudden truthful to one another because it's a covenant brother. They have made a blood covenant with that person. Blood covenant is a concept that is divine. It seems to have its origin in God. God must have been the originator of it, because there is something very holy and very special about it. That blood covenant is never broken and never violated. And when two people are in a blood covenant, they are really brothers. And they never go against one another. They never turn against one another. They never do anything against one another. It turns people into something good, So it must have a very divine origin. Now let me give you some background about the blood covenant, because then only we will understand the new covenant. The new covenant is based on the blood covenant, because the new covenant is also a blood covenant. Jesus said, "This is my blood that was shed for you." So the new covenant is a blood covenant basically. Without understanding the blood covenant and the practice of the blood covenant over the years and what it meant to the people, you cannot really understand what the new covenant is and what it means for us today. We will look at some biblical examples also, but I want to go through history today. And I want to cover certain basic facts about the blood covenant. The reason for cutting the covenant historically has been basically three reasons. One is for safety or preservation, they made a blood covenant. A smaller tribe living near a bigger tribe always felt threatened that the bigger tribe may sometimes come and enslave them. So they were always under the threat of the bigger tribe coming and overwhelming them because of their bigness. Just by sheer number, they are beaten. So they often went to the bigger tribe before anything happened. They went to the bigger tribe and they struck a covenant with them. And they said, "Well, we are weak because we are very few in number. We don't want any intrusion from you. We don't want you to take advantage of that. Let's be brothers. Let's love one another. Let's join hands with one another. Let's live together peacefully." So they made a covenant. And so the first reason was for preservation, for safety. They made blood covenants. The blood covenant always meant that it involved cutting a part of your body, making an incision where blood flows. The word covenant in the Hebrew language literally means to cut until blood flows. That's what the word means. The word covenant means. It's not just signing a paper. It's not just signing a document. It's cutting a part of your body until blood flows. So that is how they made the covenant. And I'll talk about it a little more later. So the second reason, the first reason is for safety. Smaller tribes went to the bigger tribes for safety's sake, for preservation, and they made a covenant. Second reason is when two men are involved in business as partners, it's very easy for one man to cheat the other and take advantage of the other by some way or the other. Suppose one has to stay in town and mind the business and the other has to travel for the sake of business. All kinds of things can go on in town where the one guy stays and takes care of business. He can really cheat him out of all of his profit and so on. So when the guy travels, he's always afraid what is happening over there in the office, what is happening over there back in his business. So in order to get rid of that fear, in order to make sure things are all right, they entered into a blood covenant, because when you enter into a blood covenant, you never violate it. A person who violates it is considered cursed. The ground he stands upon is cursed. Even his relatives will turn him over to be killed, because to violate a blood covenant was a very serious business in those days. So they trusted in the blood covenant to keep the business relationship good. So the two businessmen, in order to make sure that one does not cheat on the other, they made blood covenant. You know, they made a blood covenant so that they will stick together, they'll do the business together, be sincere to one another, and not cheat on one another. Thirdly, if two people loved one another, they made a blood covenant. Like Jonathan and David, for example. We'll study that in the weeks to come. A wonderful example from the Bible where Jonathan and David make a covenant because of their love for one another. They were devoted in love for one another. They made a covenant. So for love's sake, they made a covenant. So for safety's sake, first of all. Secondly, businessmen entering into partnership with each other cut the covenant to ensure that neither would take advantage of the other. Thirdly, for the sake of love, people made the blood covenant. There was a method to cutting the covenant. Let me talk about these things in order to really get into the blood covenant, the new covenant, and what it means for us. We need to talk this background first. The cutting of the covenant, was practically same all over the world with some minor differences in procedure. In some places, it was degenerated. It has degenerated into a very grotesque and almost a horrible rite, which is ungodly. They started drinking blood and so on as part of the covenant, which God never approves. I'll show you that. But the cutting of the covenant and the sacredness of the covenant and the promises that are made in the covenant and how wonderfully it is kept must be noticed. Even though there are some diversions, there are some religions and some people that have taken it and made it, twisted it and turned it into something grotesque and all of that. Something unacceptable by God. But basically, blood covenant involved this. The two men, when they wanted to make a blood covenant, they came together bringing a priest. First, there was an exchange of gifts between them. The exchange of gifts meant that they gave the best that they could give to one another, indicating that everything, they're saying this to the other man, to the covenant partner, everything that I have hereafter belongs to you, and everything that you have hereafter belongs to me. This gift is a token of that. I'm giving you this to show you that everything that I have belongs to you, and he also gives the gift to show, to indicate that everything belongs to him. Even though they never went to one another and asked for anything, they did this as a symbol of that. The fact that anytime if they needed it, they can indeed do that. After they exchanged gifts, there was the cutting of the covenant, where literally their wrists, in the wrist area, there was an incision made until blood flowed out of the wrist. And then, in places like Africa and the Arab countries, what they did was they took certain drops of blood from that wrist and let it drop into a glass of wine. They did the same thing to the other fellow, the covenant partner. They cut his wrist and let the blood flow. And some drops of blood were dropped into the same cup. So the two bloods mingled. They mixed the two bloods and they gave them to drink it. The Bible never approves us to drink blood. I want to say it at the outset. This is a twisted and turned form of blood covenant. I don't think God, when he instituted it, he ever meant for blood to be drunk or blood to be eaten. Let me just read to you a couple of verses, because I don't want any of you going home today and cutting a blood covenant and dropping a couple of drops of blood in a wine glass and drinking it, saying, Pastor Sam said this is the blood covenant, it has been twisted and turned in a bad way. That is why I think Christians have rejected the idea of blood covenant as something that is heathen practice. During the time of Augustine, for example, he did away with the very idea of the blood covenant and all of these things, and the phylacteries that they wore with the promises of the blood covenant written in them and so on. This was a wonderful practice, but he got rid of it because of certain features like this. The fact that they did certain things wrong, he thought that it was a heathen practice. And the church basically rejected it, thereby in their minds, completely rejecting the idea of the blood covenant. And because of that, today they cannot understand the cross of Calvary. They cannot understand the new covenant. If you don't understand the blood covenant, you won't understand the new covenant. Yes, some tribes and some people may have taken and twisted it and turned it into something grotesque. It doesn't matter. Let's go back and look at it in its purest form and understand it. So let me read from Genesis chapter 9. Let me read to you verse 3 and 5. Every moving thing that liveth shall be meat for you, even as the green herb I have given you all things. But flesh with the life thereof, which is the blood thereof, shall you not eat. And surely your blood of your lives will I require, at the hand of every beast will I require it. And at the hand of a man, and at the hand of every man's brother will I require the life of man. Very clearly God says, the flesh with the life thereof, which is the blood thereof. Which means, the life of the flesh is in the blood, and I don't want you to be eating it or drinking it, because the life of the flesh, the physical life, is in the blood. Alright? Turn to Leviticus chapter 17. There is a very clear scripture there. Leviticus chapter 17. Let me read to you verse 10 and 11. And whatsoever man there be of the house of Israel, or of the strangers that sojourn among you, that eateth any manner of blood, I will even set my face against that soul that eateth blood, and I will cut him off from among the people. See, God is very much against this thing about consuming blood. I'll cut him off from among his people, he says. For the life of the flesh is in the blood, and I've given it to you upon the altar to make an atonement for your souls. For it is the blood that maketh an atonement for the soul. You can shed the blood to make an atonement for your soul. It can be shed in an altar. It can make an atonement for souls, but you cannot consume it. You cannot drink it. You cannot eat it, and so on. The Bible is very clear about it. Because the life of the flesh is in the blood. See, the thing is so real. That is why many people from the ancient tribes, they used to drink the blood of certain animals. For example, they believed that if you drank the blood of a ox or a rhinoceros, you will somehow get the life, the strength, and the power that is there in an ox or a rhinoceros into yourself. Because the life of that ox is in that blood. So when you drink that blood, they believed that they can receive that strength. Such beliefs were there, so they literally drank the blood, And when Jesus took the cup and said, this is my blood of the new covenant which is shed for you, drink ye it. He means to say, partake in my life, in all that I am. This is a symbol. See, the Bible always, allows you to use only the symbol, the grape juice or the wine, as a substitute for the blood, never the blood. You're never told to drink the blood. You're told only to drink the substitute, which stood as